Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. This is Mishnah Yomi for Shabbat Bechukotai. I am, of course, recording Erev Shabbat, and it will be, God willing, posted as soon as Shabbat ends. We are holding in the Mishnah Yomi in Sheviit, finishing the 6th parak today. So we were in the 6th parak at the 6th Mishnah, a continuation of yesterday's theme. Ein mevi'en Trumah mechutza la'aretz. Do not bring Trumah from outside of Eretz Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael. The bartender explains we don't want Kohanim, who must remain tahor, to go to Chutz La'aretz to get the Trumah that's out there in Chutz La'aretz and bring it back, because in Chutz La'aretz, rabbinically, there's a gezerah of Tumah, because the non-Jews used to bury their dead pretty much anywhere. You really don't know where the graves were. They weren't always marked so well. Funerals were not done properly as they were. It's actually the Jewish custom of burying the dead is why other nations do that as well. They're following in our example. So outside of Eretz Yisrael, there was a gezerah of Tumah. We don't want the Kohanim going there to get Tameh. Even though it's Tameh Trumah, they could burn it. They could use it as fuel. We mentioned yesterday Shemen Sreifa. It's oil of Trumah that must be burned. Amar Rabbi Shimon, Shemati B'Perish. Rabbi Shimon says, again, like he said yesterday, I heard explicitly, Shemaviyin Misuria. You could bring it from Syria. And Maviyin Chutz La'aretz, but not the rest of Chutz La'aretz. Rabbi Shimon had heard that Syria, which again we mentioned yesterday, was Kibush Yachid by David HaMelech, conquered Syria for Parnasa before all of Eretz Yisrael was conquered. So it has this quasi in-between status. It's a bit like Eretz Yisrael, and the rabbis made some edicts on it like Eretz Yisrael, but as we saw regarding Sheviit, not entirely like Eretz Yisrael. Shkoyach Rabosai, moving on to the 7th parak. Mishnah Aleph, Klal Godel Amru B'Shviit. There's a big general rule about Shviit. Kol shehu ma'achal adam. Anything that's eaten by human beings, u'machal behema, or food for animals, u'miminat tzavim, or it's used for dyeing. A lot of the dyed-in-the-wool dyes were made out of plants. Ve'eino mikayim ba'aretz. It does not last in the ground. So if you leave it in the ground, it doesn't get stored like the onions we saw earlier in the bulbs, but it starts to rot. Yesh lo shvi'it. It has kedusha in the 7th year. L'damav shvi'it. We haven't mentioned this before, but if you would sell Shemitah produce, the money or the exchange, if you traded the Shemitah produce for some fish, which of course is not gedulei karka, it doesn't grow out of the ground, so it doesn't have kedusha Shemitah, but if you traded your produce that did grow from the ground on the 7th year for fish, congratulations, that fish now has kedusha of Sheviit. It has to be eaten with the same gedarim, the same regulations, but not only that, but the original retains its sanctity. So even if you traded something for money, and then for fish, and then for beer, or whatever it is, the last product is invested with kedusha Sheviit, and the original never loses it. So it has, so the damav, the value, also has kedusha Sheviit, and yesh lo bir l'damav bir. And we mentioned bir. It's hard to translate this word. I see the Art Scroll Parish doesn't translate bir. We're going to explain in this parak. It's really when it's no longer available in the field, you have to put whatever's in your house of the same species outside and make it hefker, make it available for anyone. And again, we mentioned there's a machlokis if that person putting it out could then go back later and take it in, or if he had to mamish be mafker it for other people only and not take it himself. So the produce itself and what you exchanged it for, or the money you exchanged it for, also has bir. The eze, and now the Mishnah gives examples. Ze ole haluf hashote. These are leaves of the wild loof. So loof is interesting because apparently the domesticated loof was sweeter and more commonly eaten, but here even the wild loof, which is a little more bitter and not as gishmak to eat, it still constitutes a foodstuff because people still eat it. Or va'ale ha-dandana. Dandana apparently is a mint. In modern Hebrew we say nana is a mint, but hadandana apparently is a mint, which is eaten, made for tea, whatever. Ulshina kreishim, and endives and leeks. So even though if these grow wild, you could still eat the wild ones if you didn't have them on your table. The hargila is a purslane, apparently is edible. Hanetzacholov, the milky flour. So even the Mishnah is sort of including these because even though these aren't commonly eaten among vegetables, they still are eaten by people, so they count. Machal behema, the Mishnah continues, hahochim vehedardarim. This includes thorns and thistles. Even though these aren't the most gishmak food for animals, they still are edible for animals. Minitzovim, and items used for dyeing. Tzviche istotis includes aftergrowth of isotis is translated dyer's wood. It's apparently blue. Vikotza. Kotza is a safflower. Yesh lahen shvit ledemehen shvit. So the Mishnah sort of summarizes what we mentioned before. These have kedusha of Shemitah of the 7th year, and ledamav for their value, their money, whatever you traded for them, also is kedusha. Yesh len bir ledemehem bir. And again, when they run out of the field, they're not available anymore, you would have to take it out of the house as well, as we're going to discuss in this parak. Shkoyach rabosai, Shavuot tov.